Jana,
Heather.
we're talking about small audiences today and what kind of content to create, maybe some mindset tips around audience growth when you have a tiny audience.
Yeah, I think we call this small audience blues.
Small
And
audience.
I think the reason I thought of that as a title is because I feel like some of the people in my audience and people inside my program, I leverage content,
Mhm.
look around at people who've been in the business for a long time, been doing this for a long time, or even people that haven't been doing this a long time, but really like seem to have like cracked the audience growth nut quickly. And they get discouraged because they're like, oh, that person has, thousands of followers, or, that person got into that big summit. So they must have a really big list because I think that summit had a list requirement, things like that. And they get frustrated. They think like, oh man, how am I going to do this if I am growing my audience slowly or I'm starting with such a small audience? Even when you know you have strategies in your back pocket to grow your audience, like the four different categories and all the different strategies that you and I shared in our series a
Yep.
few months back, which we'll talk about. Just knowing that you have that road ahead of you where you need to do those things to grow that audience can sometimes feel like you're, like pushing a rock up a hill type of thing.
Yep.
So, yeah, so I thought we would talk about it today and talk about not only like tactics for growing your audience, which we might sneak in a few of those. Ooh, what'd you get?
Sugar cube.
Sugar cube, yum.
I forgot my sugar.
Yeah, but also just like that, yeah, the thought process around it, the mindset around it. So yeah. So here we are.
Love it. When I was first beginning on YouTube, it was my first foray into creating my own audience.
Hmm.
I was getting away from at the time this whole thought process of, display ads and monetizing with affiliate marketing and using Facebook groups,
Hmm.
referral networks. I was pretty much pivoting away from everything I had known prior.
Hmm.
And it was so scary because at that point in time, I didn't have a lot of clients and I was rebuilding my business after the fall.
Yeah.
And I knew long term that this was going to be good for me. But at the same time, it was a hurdle I had to get over mentally
Hmm.
because I
Like,
was starting at like zero
yeah,
on,
like intellectually you knew that this was a good strategy, that it was a
yeah,
sound strategy. But like I was mentioning earlier, when you thought about when you like you knew there was a lot of work ahead of you, and in some ways that can be exciting, and then sometimes it can, and in certain moments, like if we're tired at the end of the day and we're thinking
yeah,
about it, it can feel heavy. So yeah, that's
yeah,
a good, yep. Thinking back to those days. Yeah, I remember early on when I was doing more work behind the scenes of other people's businesses, and my audience was growing more slowly because I just didn't really have as much um, like, it's not that I didn't have time because I actually had a pretty good system even back then for visibility, but I wasn't focused on it, I guess. Although, that's interesting too, because way back in the beginning, I think one of the reasons why I've been successful, to be honest, at audience growth and like sticking with my plans and things is because I was so busy back then with um, done for you work that I wasn't watching the pot boil, but I was also doing the things that intellectually, just like you were just saying, I knew were the sound strategies to grow an audience. So it's like I
yeah,
was growing that audience and it was kind of growing without me, like I was doing the things needed to grow it because I was creating content that would attract people to me. But I wasn't really watching the numbers very closely. It's like I wasn't watching that pot boil. And that was for sure on all the platforms really that I was on. And so that helped me, I think, a little bit, mentally. But um, with your YouTube channel, did you experience what a lot of people talk about, which is kind of like it took a long time to gain the first bit of traction, but then it started to like feel like it was snowballing?
no, and it still does not feel like that.
Really?
It felt like that
How
from
many
January,
subscribers do you have now?
like
That's a
20,000.
lot. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Um, it took forever, years to get to like 6,000 subscribers. And then I
Yeah.
went from like 6 to 14, like fair, like within a year.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
what I mean.
in like the last, I don't know how long, I'm only putting on like 500 subscribers a month right now. It's not very many.
Okay.
So I feel like I'm just still like trudging along compared to competitors on YouTube who are like
Oh, yep.
posting videos and like exploding and like blowing up.
Yes. Okay. Good point.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm just over here just continuing to do the thing. And, I didn't publish a video yesterday because I'm waiting on a sponsor to approve it. So
Hmm.
occasionally I have like little haphazards where I don't publish like right on time, and I don't know how much that impacts it or not, but
Hmm.
yeah,
I'm not wearing my headphones. Is my audio okay?
yeah,
Okay. I might grab them just so that if there's a big like noisiness that it won't, you won't catch it. But yeah, that's interesting that you point that out too, because I think a lot of people in my audience as well, coaches, course creators, service providers, they want to use they're growing an audience so that they can have more people buy their products and services.
hmm,
And so it is important, like I think, gosh, I feel like we talk about this in almost every episode of this YouTube live stream series that we do, but
yeah,
it's important to remember the goal of the content and the goal of the audience you're growing, because as people who sell products and services, we don't need as large an audience
right.
as people who are growing an audience to be influencers and monetize more through like brand deals and partnerships and things like that. So, and even though you do some partnerships and some brand deals and you have that kind of influencer streak to your business, it's not the main, driver of income for your business. It's an extra stream of income for you. So
Barely like anything meaningful most
yeah,
months.
just a small percentage. I'm just gonna grab my earbuds. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Mhm. I'm listening.
But I mean, every little dollar adds up, right?
Oh
So
yeah. Mm.
I treat every revenue stream with care and, you know, do my best to make sure that everyone feels taken care of.
Yeah.
Um, and make sure you have your earbuds in. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Oh, you're doing it the way that you should do it. Okay. Of course you would, because you're a smart cookie.
I put the buds in first, then I plugged in so I could hear you.
So smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but mostly it's client driven right now. It's actually about
Mhm.
half membership, digital product sales, half clients. I really want to
Mhm.
push that the other way. I want to push more towards students and,
Mhm.
membership members and things like that. So content strategy needs to change slightly.
Mhm.
Um, Not even content strategy, just like calls to action
Yeah.
need to change.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I think your content strategy shifts a little bit too, when you are shifting your, like your signature offer or your main offer, as well. I think the biggest thing since now that we both kind of shared a little bit of our own experiences, the biggest thing I really wanted to make sure that we get across in this video for anyone who's watching this and thinking, yeah, I have small audience blues. I relate to that feeling that I'm describing where, you're getting started and you feel like you're behind because everybody else, already has a big audience and you're just growing slowly and you're watching the numbers, go up, but then they go down a little too, right? Um, I think the biggest thing I want to really get across to people when it comes to this is for most people, unless you are doing like an ads strategy, which is not an organic growth strategy,
Yep.
growing organically requires good content. And
Mhm.
so I do hear a lot of people say to me, like, I'm going to wait to create content until I have a bigger audience. Like, I only have 10 people on my email list, or I only have 100 people on my email list. I heard someone say that to me the other day. Or I don't really have a lot of followers yet on Instagram. And that's frustrating because I have so few followers to begin with, and then only, a certain percentage of them see what I post. So it feels like when I post something, it's not worth it. And I get I totally understand that our brain tries to trick us into thinking that like, no one's paying attention, so it's not worth it and whatnot. But in order to grow your audience organically, people follow and subscribe to people who they want more content from.
Mhm.
And so, in order to get them to follow you, subscribe to you, maybe save your post so that like they'll see other ones in the future, even if they didn't follow, things like that, it's super important that you focus on creating quality content. And we'll talk about like what kind of content we both think needs to be created if you want to grow your audience.
Yeah.
Um, but it's really important that you have a plan for audience growth content if one of your goals is audience growth,
Mhm.
and that you follow through with that plan and do it regularly, so that you will grow your audience. And it's like we're kind of like pulling both levers at the same time, really, in our businesses.
Yeah.
Like we're pulling the audience growth lever and we're also pulling like the nurturing and converting and selling lever as well. And you need content to do both. Quality content is where that's going to start. Yes, there are other ways to do this. You could pour some money into ads. I've seen more and more, especially coaches who are just getting started, if
Hmm.
they nail their messaging pretty quickly, they can start doing ads pretty quickly and see those work. But for like 95%, I would say, of people who have small audience blues, if you will,
Hmm.
um, throwing a bunch of money at ads right away isn't the way to go. The way to go is to grow organically initially, most of the time, not always, but most of the time. And that does require quality content, right? So we'll talk about what I'll share what I think people need to be creating. But mostly it boils down to creating content that's relevant to your audience, your ideal audience.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And then the other thing I'll say about that quickly, and we can dive into it a little bit more, is this is one of the reasons why I love long form content for people who are getting started with content. Because if you think about it this way, say you have, 50 Instagram followers, and then maybe two of them see your post when you post, because unfortunately these days with Instagram, most of our followers aren't seeing our content. It does feel like, oh, I just, wasted half an hour of my life creating, a B-roll, putting text over the B-roll, writing a caption that I thought would be good so that if people do see this and when they see it,
Yep.
the caption will hook them in. They'll be able to follow, they'll read the caption, they'll follow my call to action, they'll do the thing I want them to do, whether that's get on my email list or save this content for later or whatever it is. And then it's frustrating because like you spent your time doing that to make sure it was high quality and now it's gone forever because when you create something on Instagram, it's going to be gone in a fast moving news feed.
Hmm.
Most of the time, people aren't like seeing those things that you're creating later on. Not always. I mean, there are some people that might go back in your feed, things like that. Meanwhile, though, over in long form content world, right, where you and I like to live, on blogs like I teach, on channels like YouTube, for example, you with long form content, podcasts are like this too. When you're creating long form content, it's like you're building your body of work, and people can always go back and read your blog posts. You can always
Yeah.
share your blog posts over and over and over again in different ways, whether you're repurposing the content, the way I teach it in HLC, whether you're just simply resharing it again the same way you did last time, or resharing it again in a different way with a different angle or a different gem, is like what I call it.
Hmm.
You're building this body of work that doesn't feel like a waste because you're going to be able to reshare it when, like now you have 10 people on your email list and you share your blog post with those 10 people. But
Yeah.
then, a month from now, you'll have 100 people, let's say, or 2 months from now, you have 100 people on your email list because maybe you were in a summit or you have been, doing a lot of work to like grow your audience on a platform like Threads or something. Now you get to share that same blog post that you worked so hard to create with those 100 people and you share it in like a different way, right? And then 6 months down the road, you get to share that blog post again with the
Hmm.
1,200 people that are on your list, right? So, and these numbers, just so you all know that are listening, like this isn't like what I think you should, how fast I think you should grow. This is just kind of random numbers that I'm pulling out. But just to illustrate the idea that this is one of the reasons, again, why one and done content gets really frustrating when you're growing your audience and you have small audience blues, but investing your time in creating long form content has so many benefits. But one of them is that you don't feel like you're just like throwing stuff into an abyss that no one's going to see. You'll get to reshare it
Well,
and use it and leverage it for years.
and let's be honest, even people with massive audiences on Instagram these days are complaining on threads that their audiences aren't seeing their content and they have
Yeah.
like 100,000 to 300,000 subs like
Hmm.
followers on Instagram. It's just, I feel like it's not a platform for sustainability long term for many people these days. I mean, if you have
Yeah.
something built in and your people know you're there or whatever, like you've trained them, great. But like most people, especially newer people that do have small audiences, are not utilizing Instagram like that as well these days. Maybe there are some people that are, but I
Yep.
mean,
You
I
know,
recently, um, within the last year, I found someone on Instagram, and I promise I'll make a point. Found someone on Instagram. I started consuming his content, loved it, saw that he was putting on a comedy show here in The Hague before
oh,
I even moved here, bought tickets because I knew it was going to be after I arrived. Went to see the show with my husband last week.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
always had plans to go back and see him again, and it was because of Instagram.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would have heard of him prior or
Mhm,
otherwise, but because his content is so engaging and so
mhm.
shareable, I found him, have continued to engage with his content.
Yeah.
Like it is possible, but I do feel like it's difficult, more difficult than like long-term audience building.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's not like it doesn't work. It's just that if you feel like growing your audience feels like pushing a hill up a boulder up a hill, that boulder's heavier on social media. That basically, it's not impossible by
And
any means,
honestly,
but
just like audience building and like all of it,
mhm.
it's hard. It's hard. I feel like it's hard no matter what platform you choose,
Yeah.
depending on what your mindset is. I mean, hard to you might be one thing, whereas hard to me might mean another thing. So, like,
Mhm.
define what your hard is and figure out what, difficulty level you're willing to accept.
Mhm.
But knowing that we're kind of all in the same boat and we're just all like paddling and we're just trying to
Yeah.
figure it out. Like, at some point, it's going to be easier and the wind's going
Mhm.
to catch your little sails. And
Yeah.
one of Jana's favorite metaphors is going to take off and you're going to start sailing. And
Oh yeah. I forgot
it's
about that.
it's
I
gonna
used,
get
yeah.
easier eventually, but like,
I used to compare Pinterest to a sailboat, whereas Instagram was like a rowboat.
yeah,
Yeah, I remember that. That was a good analogy. Yeah, and there's a few things come to mind. Number one, I was just talking to a friend the other day about how I always say, like, the promise for high leverage content right now is that you'll create your own capsule library of evergreen blog posts
yeah,
that convert, that attract and convert clients quickly and get you off the content treadmill. And I was saying to her that sometimes I worry because I'm very active on Threads. I really love repurposing my blog post content to Instagram. I have a whole series coming out this week where I'm repurposing a newer blog post, and I'm just so happy that it's coming out because like the content's so good. Um,
yeah,
I worry, and like I'm here with you every week. Like I'm very visible. I do a lot. And I worry sometimes that people will look at my content and think, well, wait a minute, isn't she on the content treadmill? And my friend said to me, like, no, no, no. She was like, the content treadmill is different for everybody. And part of it is it's not just about like how much content you put out, it's about how it feels putting it out. Does it feel like you're working really hard and too hard and you're exhausted? And I'm like, no, it
yeah,
doesn't at all. Like, I love this. I love this visibility stuff. And she's like, exactly. And that comes through in your energy. And like I'm thinking about doing like an 18-part series on Instagram. And I'm like, but does that look like the content treadmill? And so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put a little boilerplate in it that says all of these myths and truths, is it's because it's going to be myths and truths
yeah,
series, are repurposed from my high leverage blog posts because they will be, because I really almost like, 95% of the content that I schedule is not in the moment content, but the content that I schedule comes right out of, from my blog post. So for me, it's really not hard. Like it is easy, and I don't feel like I'm on the treadmill, whereas someone else might feel like they're on the treadmill. And I think that my point is that this is like therapy session. You can send me your bill. Um, this like my point is that like I can like high leverage content and having long form content, whether it's a blog or a podcast or a YouTube channel, it makes it so that all the other content feels easier. And so you don't feel like you're on the treadmill, but you can still be very visible to your ideal audience.
yeah,
So I'm not sure where that all came from, other than the idea that, um, like if it's hard, like it shouldn't, anything worth doing takes effort, but also I think it shouldn't feel exhausting. It should feel energizing. You know what I mean? So, but I think things can
yeah.
feel hard and also energizing at the same time. I
I
know
feel
that's how
like,
you feel when you put content out.
yeah, and we've definitely talked about this before. If,
Yeah.
if social media feels exhausting for you, then it might not be the right platform for you right now. Um,
Yeah.
Finding your creativity and like joy for creating content, I think is important to keep going long term. I love turning on a camera and just filming for YouTube and sending the footage to Sonia because well, that's just so easy for me.
Mhm.
Um, I obviously don't just like turn on the camera. Like, there's so much work that goes into it prior to that.
Yeah,
But
right, right. So much pre-work. Yep.
I enjoy it and
Yeah.
then it turns into something good
Yeah,
later. At least I hope it does.
it does.
So I think you really like you hit on something there. You really do
Yeah.
need to find something that you enjoy doing.
Yes, and also, this is another thing. I think that you might not enjoy it right away, and it takes practice and it gets easier and more
Mm.
enjoyable as you hit your stride. So you have to keep doing it so that
There's
you'll
definitely a
figure out, where you hit your stride and you're like, okay, I got this now. This feels really good and fun.
there's definitely a level of discomfort when you first start doing anything new where it just feels crap.
Exactly.
It's not good. And I think that's all part of building the skill.
Hmm.
And once you are comfortable and you're in a flow and you've figured out what works for you and you've got your platform, you've got your content types and all of that stuff down and
Yep.
you're just creating, um, I think there's a certain point where you just need to be creating in order to see what the results are. Like it's like a guy out in front of a bar playing the guitar on the street. He's hoping people throw a few bucks into his guitar case, but like he's there anyways, and he's still playing. And
Hmm.
he's maybe trying out some new songs or whatever and just like working things out. So when he goes into the theater and he plays a show or whatever, like the people paying for tickets feel like they got a good product, right? So I feel like there's like this level of practice that we need to be doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and this happens definitely in all levels. Like when
Mhm.
you go to another level of creating content or like a different style or like you've advanced, I feel like there's another level of like trying it out and feeling it
Mhm.
out, practicing. So yeah, there is definitely
Yeah.
a level of discomfort. You're not going to be comfortable all the time.
Yeah. Exactly.
And you're not going to like
Exactly.
doing it all the time. I mean, there are times where I
Right.
definitely don't like creating YouTube content, and I
Yeah.
definitely have 5 or 6 takes before I get a final video.
Yeah.
Still happens,
Yep.
but
I
it's
think,
a lot
okay.
less. Like it's more rare.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too, this reminds me too of, and we'll get back on track with audience growth specifically, but this also reminds me of this idea that like we do run businesses at the end of the day. We're not, creating just for the fun of it.
Yeah.
Yes, it's great if it's fun. We want to enjoy our businesses. We want to enjoy the marketing part, just like we enjoy the delivery part. But also, this is your job. Like if you are running a business, like this is your job. So
Yep.
sometimes creating content, you're doing it because you know you need to as part of your job. And sometimes that even means that maybe you're creating content about topics that aren't
Yep.
exactly the ones that you would be the most thrilled to write about. I talk about this sometimes with my HLC students where they really want to write a blog post about XYZ topic. And I'm like, yeah, but is that really relevant for your ideal audience? Are they going to really, is that going to stop the scroll? Is that going to get them reading? Are you meeting people where they're at? Or are you being a little bit expert brainy and wanting to talk about, some nerdy new research or something, but not connecting it back to a problem? So sometimes too, you do have to realize that if you want your content to work, and when I say work, I mean to stop the scroll, to attract new followers, new subscribers, to
Yep.
nurture people appropriately, to convert them. Sometimes you need to compromise a little bit in terms of like, writing topics that aren't maybe the most exciting or fun. This also happens a lot when you're not a beginner, because usually if you're an expert on something, you're not a beginner. But at the same time, the people who come to you, they're way behind you. They're still figuring things out. So if you skip over things that feel too basic to you, because either you honestly think that like, oh, everyone knows that, which is usually not true, or if you think, well, that's just not what I want to spend my time teaching about because it's boring to me because I'm beyond that, then you're missing out on catching a lot of people, where they're at and giving them what they would actually need to want to follow you, to want to subscribe to you, that type of thing. So I think it's important just always to be like in every way, kind of shifting our thought process into, okay, let me put myself into the shoes of my ideal person. Is this the right topic? Is this how I should present it? Is there a simpler way to talk about this? So, but that's another little tangent. So, but I think it's relevant to audience growth and it's related to what I want to share next too, which is like kind of like two different things to think about in terms of what kind of content you need in order to be growing your audience. So we can talk about that next too, but I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to my babbling on there.
No, Saul's Toaster in the chat says, how'd you find your first clients as a Pinterest manager when nobody knows you and you don't want to make YouTube videos?
Mhm.
Obviously you don't need to make YouTube videos in order to find Pinterest clients.
Right.
Um, what worked for me is not like that was years ago. So I've obviously built up my name and people know me now. So if I had to start over again, Sauls, I probably would look at networking first.
Mm.
So, getting into some coffee chats with other people that are doing something similar to you, whether it's marketing on different platforms or they're doing Shopify setups or they're doing web design, and like networking with people and figuring out, how they serve their clients and if there's any way that you could serve them. And then looking at platforms that do matching services or like connecting you with potential clients. So Upwork is an obvious place to go, but it's hard to land high paying jobs that last a while there, I feel like. So I would opt for platforms like FreeUp, where you actually have to apply to be on the platform and they match you with clients that are looking for you. So
Mm.
that might be a couple of options. Facebook groups are very much still a thing for finding work. So finding some VA job boards or Facebook groups that post jobs might also be an option. Um, so yeah, I hope that's helpful just for finding those first few, and then you get the ball rolling, and then you know you get going.
Yeah. I think if I were starting over, and I just wrote this down because I think this would make a good longer video too, Heather, how we'd get Pinterest clients if we were starting over from scratch with no audience. Um, but I'll give you my brief version, which is I would start creating content so that I knew that my content ecosystem was growing in the background so that eventually
Mhm.
I wouldn't have to hustle anymore to get leads. Just like I did. So like I would do what I did, basically start growing my blog, start, sharing it to the different platforms where I show up so that people know I'm a Pinterest manager, Pinterest expert, and how I can help and what problems Pinterest can solve for them, things like that. And so I could get known for that. But simultaneously, in order to get my first clients, I'd probably be cold pitching, I think. I'd be cold
Uh,
pitching people who I'd be doing research on who would be a good fit for my offer.
yeah,
So I'd be looking for people who don't have a Pinterest presence, but have great content that really should be on Pinterest, and pitching them and telling them that and why, and offering them like a beta version of my service.
yeah.
Um, and yeah, and actually it's funny because I did that actually initially. Now that I think about it, I pitched someone on um, my very first Pinterest client was
We talked about
someone
this
who oh, can you hear me?
at some point. We talked about this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe we could try to find the video and go back to it. But oh, I know. It's the one called Should You Work for Free?
Yeah,
Yeah. So we'll put that in the description as well so that the person who asked can watch that because we go into it deeper. But we basically said like it can be a good strategy if you do it right. And that's what I did initially to get my first client. And then from there, I leveraged that results that I got from that first client to get more clients.
yeah,
So so yeah, that's how we would start if we didn't have audiences.
lovely.
But I want to just point out again, like I would start doing that stuff that will get me the clients right away, but I would also immediately start growing the ecosystem that's going to bring me clients more on autopilot later on.
Yep,
Because I don't want to be hustling forever on, bringing those clients in.
exactly.
Um,
So we talk about the type of content that we should create.
yeah, do you want to go first or?
So my big one is how-to content. And I talk
Mhm,
about this a lot. I talk about it often. I still create how-to content.
mhm,
Love doing it, but it is a surefire way to bring you leads. Now, they may
mhm.
not be the best in the beginning. You're going to have to do some filtering, obviously.
Yeah,
People
you
are
always
always
do.
looking for how to fix their problems. They
Yep.
have a problem, they need to solve it, they look for something. I'm currently right now experiencing a problem, searching high and low to figure out how to fix it.
Hmm.
Um, contacted support teams in order to, first see if they can help me fix it before I have to try and hire somebody, because God forbid I might have to.
Mhm.
I don't know this light is like flashing. But yeah, that's what people are doing. I'm
Yeah.
Googling to find a solution to my problem.
Yep. And you're
Or
finding,
potential clients are doing that too.
yep, you're finding blog posts, you're finding AI results, you're finding YouTube videos
Yep,
from people who are using how-to content to grow their audiences.
exactly.
Yep. Yeah, I love that. And I want to mention a couple things about that. One is that um, I think we're hearing sometimes from people out there saying, like, don't create any more how-to content. Like, that's not how you get clients. And I don't believe that that's true. And I know you don't either. So, um, inside of high leverage content, I teach my 9 into content pillar system, where there's
Mhm.
9 types of content that your audience needs to feel ready to buy.
Yep.
And half of those are, they're not, I wouldn't say they're specifically how to, although 2 of them really are very how to oriented, but half of them are very like top of funnel in that way, that are essentially giving tips and tricks and strategies and really how to content. So
Yeah.
I don't believe that you should stop creating how to content. I do believe the idea that you need more than just how-to content in order to get clients. But the how-to content is great for attracting people into your audience. The
Mhm.
second thing I want to say about that is that often what I hear from my students is they say, yeah, but with how-to content, how am I going to give people value without just giving it all away for free? And then they don't want to hire me.
Mhm.
And that's a nuanced situation, but I have a blog post about it, and actually we can put it in the description of this YouTube video as well. But there are definitely specific strategies, and I teach them inside high leverage content, and I talk about them in this blog post that you can use to create really strong content that gives value without giving it all away for free and making
Yeah.
people feel like, okay, now I don't even need to hire you type of thing. Like it's an art form, and it's actually probably, in my opinion, one of the most valuable skills that service providers and coaches, for sure, and probably others as well, but I serve service providers and coaches, can develop with their content, is learning how to give massive value without giving it all away for free and with while you're still setting up a sale.
Yep.
Um, you and I have talked about this, a lot on this channel. But I think that for anyone who's listening and thinking like, yeah, but that's what how-to content just brings you, like, tire kickers or whatever. No, 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 not if you know how to create content that converts them to clients. So
Yeah.
it is possible. Don't give up on how-to content because it's a great way to grow your audience, just like you just said. So,
Yeah.
okay, so for me, there's 2 big considerations. I think that when I see coaches and service providers out in the wild and their audiences are growing too slowly and they're like, what is going on? Why is no one paying attention? Why am
Yep.
I hearing crickets every time I put something out? It usually is because of one of 2 things that you can easily fix. The first one is that a lot of times it's because your content is very like vanilla and kind of like samey, if that makes sense, is like a lot of what other people are seeing in everywhere else. I see this a lot I have a lot of health and wellness coaches in HLC, and in my audience. And they tend to do things like, oh, I'm going to post that it's like National Sweet Potato Day, and like, here's 5 ways to use sweet potatoes. Or they'll put up like a Mel Robbins quote that they think is going to like inspire people, and things like that. And that kind of content is really just white noise these days, and it will not grow your audience. So what you actually need is content that cuts through that noise and positions you as different from other people, which is why, coming back to my 9 into content pillars, 3 out of the 9 content pillars are really designed very much around like really bringing forward, like excavating and bringing forward the things that make you different, and like your spicy opinions and your different approaches to things, frameworks that you have that are different from other people. And going a little deeper in your content is also going to help with that as well, because it's really hard to show how you are different and not be just part of the noise when you're just doing short form content, because it's like hard to go deep and be like, okay, here's what I believe. Here's, what you're doing now. Here's why that is not really the right approach, in my opinion. Here's what I would recommend instead. Here's how I
Yep.
help you do it in my offer. Like all of these things that you kind of need to hit on to really bring people along and show them that you're not just the same as the sweet potato lady, even if you were the sweet potato lady last week. Those are things that you really need like a longer, more space to do. So again, this is one of the reasons why I believe long form content is really where it's at for people who want to stand out and be different in the space. But I think that's going to be, so you really have to, in order to grow an audience and grow it more quickly, you have to show how you're different. And sometimes that means those different ways of like, being contrarian or showing spicy opinions, things like that. When I get the most reach and the most new followers from posts, for example, it's always for something like the best way to have us to get started with SEO is to ignore SEO for now. People go, wait, what? I want to, what? What are you saying, Jana? It's like they do a double take and they want to hear what I'm saying. Or if I say, you're not a blogger, you're a business owner with a blog, and there's a huge difference, let me explain. People
Yep.
are like, oh, wow, you're right. I never thought of it that way. And they lean in and they listen to what I have to say. These are the kinds of things that grow your audience when you're different, not just posting about National Sweet Potato Day or, 4 reasons why you should go out for a walk today because it's so good for blah, 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 right?
Yeah.
So that's the first one. And let me see if I can remember the second thing I wanted to say. But I think, you really need content that shows how you're different and showcases your different approaches and opinions, what makes you different than other people in your space.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you just look like the same as everybody else, and no one really, why would someone hit follow on that if you're just sharing the same thing everybody else is sharing with things that they can, look up on Google or whatever.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah. Let's see. Oh, and you know what? The second one, I already kind of covered this already. I think the second reason that I see a lot of people saying, oh, my audience growth is too slow. I have 10 people on my list. I had 8 people last month. Now I have 10 is simply, and it's so basic, but it's simply because you're just not showing up regularly. Like you're literally just not like showing up in the places where your ideal audience is with that like interesting, different content. People, people follow people and people subscribe to people and people save posts and things like that from people who they want more content from, like I said earlier. And, they're like, if you're not out there, then they're not going to know you're there. And I mean, I know this sounds so basic, but I see it all the time. There's a lot of people out there who come to me and say, like, I'm not getting clients. My audience is growing slowly. And when I really dig into it, I ask them questions and I'm like, well, what are you doing now to do that? Usually it comes down to like they still don't really feel like they know what to say in their content to get clients. And so they're kind of letting it be like a vicious cycle where because they don't know and they think it's just going to be a waste, they're just not doing it.
Yeah.
So that's where, again, like where I love to kind of get in the way of that and disrupt that and say, come into high leverage content. I'll show you how to figure out exactly what your audience needs to feel ready to buy. And then you can feel much more confident spending your time being visible with that content because you feel really good about it that it's going to convert. And that feeds on itself and creates a situation where now you're putting more content out. It's good content. It's showing how you're different. And now you see your followers and your subscribers and your reach and things like that growing. And it all kind of like feeds on itself and gives you that boost that you need to keep doing it. Um, a lot of times students come into HLC and they make money right away from their content because it's so different. So they like write something, share it, and somebody hires them and they're like, oh my God. And that's another thing that's really motivating too. When you make money from your content, you're going to want to keep putting it out. And you'll stop like hiding and thinking like, oh, my audience isn't growing, but not really being real with yourself that the reason it's not growing is because you're just not really showing up very often.
And you
Um,
can't just show up and post a Instagram story with a checklist of the things that you need to get done for the day and hope that someone is going to buy from you.
that's the same as the sweet potato thing. It's like, okay, great. It teaches people like it helps people know you and trust you a little bit, but it doesn't make any kind of case for buying from you.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, you know, you got to actually take Jenna's course and figure out how to create content that converts and do it.
I would love for people who are listening to do that, but also, if there's other ways for you to figure it out, do it. Like if my course isn't in the cards and you just need to start getting in there and experimenting more and finding out what works, even if it takes you longer because you don't have, like the cheat sheet, so to speak. I don't really think it's a cheat sheet, but like just do it. Like you need to get into action. The way to find out what converts
Yeah.
is to get into action and start creating it and seeing, seeing what happens. I feel like the system that I've built shortcuts that process. It does. I don't know why I'm shying away from shortcut because you and I both we don't want to make it sound like it's not hard work because it is. Um, but it shortens that learning curve, I guess, that you have when you are constantly having to put out like lots and lots of content to see what converts. But like if that's what you need to do to figure it out, like just do that. Don't stay quiet, don't stay invisible.
Yeah.
That's the message.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Sometimes you just need to talk and create content in order to
Mhm.
see what's gonna resonate with people. And I think going back to that mindset thing earlier of just like doing it messy, I hear people all too often say, "Oh, I haven't published my secret boards with my pins on them because there's only one on there."
Mm.
Or I haven't published I haven't shared my blog because there's only one blog.
Mhm.
We all only started with one.
Exactly. That you need one before you'll have four.
So please just hit publish,
Yeah. Yeah.
share it, and let's see what happens. I'm like such a go-getter in that way of like, let's just see what happens. I don't
Yeah.
know what's gonna happen when I move to Europe into a new country. I don't know. I guess we're gonna find
Let's
out.
see what happens.
We sure are.
hmm
Um,
Love that about you. You're
so
not afraid. Or you do
no,
it anyway, even if you're a little afraid, you still do it.
do it anyways.
There's a content lesson there.
So what if one person reads it? That's great.
Mhm. Yeah,
Um, I don't know. I
sorry.
just come from a kind of a unique background of um sales, and
hmm
I brought that into marketing. I did not have a marketing background when I started this. I had a sales background, business background, which is useful, but I
Yeah.
got really accustomed to being told no and
Yep.
like making it a challenge.
Yeah, and not making it
Um,
mean that the next one's going to be a no. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's interesting you say that. I actually have more of a sales background than a marketing background too. Like I studied marketing in college, but then the jobs that I had, I mean, I worked in corporate HR for a while, but like after that, I was really doing more sales than marketing. But I bring a lot of that sales into the type of marketing. I just, people say all the time, they try to say like sales and marketing aren't the same thing, but I actually don't really think that's true. I think sales and marketing kind of are the same thing. At least
yeah.
in our space, it is. I don't know.
I feel like it's two different hands on a body. Like
Yeah.
one has to put the stuff out, and then this one has to do the sales.
Yeah,
But we do the sales in the marketing content too, right?
totally. Totally.
Decide to buy from you because of
Exactly.
what you put into your content.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like, yeah.
People watch my YouTube videos to see if I actually know what I'm talking about. And then
hmm
they go to my website and they submit a form and they're like, "Hi, help me.
Right. Take my money. Solve my
You know
problem.
what you're talking about. You
hmm
seem to know this is, I get this in my forms a lot.
You seem to know what you're talking about.
You seem to know what you're talking about. Can you help
You're
me?"
like, thank you. Thank you, I think. It's funny.
So funny.
All right. Well,
What?
hopefully we've given some people some, motivation today to know that even
Yeah,
if you have small audience blues, um, keep working on it because it does grow. Your audience will grow if you create content like the content we talked about, those three things that we talked about a few minutes ago. Top of funnel, how to, not white noise, but really shows that you're different. And the second one was basically like showing up, basically. So it was kind of like two different ways, considerations for creating content that doesn't get ignored, that grows your audience faster. And then we also talked about like not watching the pot boil.
yeah,
That's important, I think, with any kind of like audience growth. We're going to put some resources in the YouTube description for this video as well, so that people who want to take this a little further can either, we're going to put our 4-part series that we did on different
yeah.
strategies, specific ways that you can grow your audience. We talked about different ways to do that a while back. We'll put a couple of blog posts that we mentioned in there as well for people. And yeah, what else? What else?
Next week, we're talking about social media burnout.
Mm.
So I think this segues really beautifully, and you did that, which makes so much sense.
I don't know if I did it on purpose, but yeah.
You did that planning. Just
Yes.
just take the W.
Yeah.
So
I'll
we're gonna
take
chat
it.
about that next week,
Take it.
and I think that this is a great place to stop.
Yeah.
Okay,
All
we'll see
right.
you next week, same place,
Okay.
same time. All righty.
Hey.